baristry is not like something that you're going to learn, and maybe at a point, yes, you may not get a job immediately, but it's a skill that you have in your head, and you can actually invent and start your own business. That's the beauty about it. Like, the more you get exposure, the more knowledge you get from different places. So for any barista out there, any young man out there who is really lacking, and they feel like, should I try it? Come on, it's time. The coffee industry is growing big in Uganda and out. Baristas are really respected people, not like before. So please join. It is really a very good adventure. Come on, down at Blue Prose. We are ready for you.
What is Divine Bamboo in a nutshell?
Okay. So Divine Bamboo is an innovative forestry and energy company. It's a Ugandan company. And our mission is to stop deforestation in Uganda. We do that through the promotion of bamboo as a sustainable alternative to cutting down traditional hardwoods. So that was my motivation, really, because Uganda is losing so much tree cover. We are losing so much forest because mainly of the need to cook. So because of fuel wood in the form of charcoal and firewood, a lot of people don't have a choice but to go to the forest and cut down trees. Yeah. And so we wanted to provide an alternative to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so when you started to provide an alternative to this, how has this been received by the people that you're talking to?
So, of course, with any new innovation, it's not straightforward. Yeah. You don't get the idea today and then the idea is mature. Yeah. First of all, the idea, the business model takes time to develop. Yeah. And in the same way, the audience, the customers also need time to adapt to the new products and like the new plant in this case. So it's a gradual process, but I would say that we are seeing very positive change.
Okay.
I have the pleasure to present to you
KCCA has taken a number of steps to address this sanitation challenge, which include, but not limited to, the following: the setup,
Welcome to Slam Dunk Basketball Talk.
A wise man once said, "The future has a name, and its name is hope. A tiny flicker of light that feeds on hope is enough to shatter any shield of darkness." At Mandulus, we really believe.
at level where you can say at least I can earn something from hip hop music or from hip hop as a culture. So we're at that step now. But now finding ways you can do it is very, very important, because a business is a commercial activity.
Yes.
Means that if something's not commercial, it's not what?
Yes.
It's not a business.
Yes, yeah.
So how are you going to make it a business? That's where you have to look through, either get people to understand that most of the time start as solo artists. You find that as a solo artist, you have to do everything, everything for yourself. Yeah. That era of I remember way back, some people used to say like, I'm looking for like that, like the statement "I'm looking for a manager" used to be very common then.
Yes.
Because people used not to accept that there are no managers until you do something.
Yes.
For
yourself.
Yes, until you do something for yourself. So it used to be a common statement for artists: I'm looking for a manager. Oh, I'm looking for a manager. I have music, I'm looking for a manager. Yeah. But the industry, our sector is different. Yeah. You have to do something. If you sit on yourself and say you're looking for a manager, then you never get them. Yes. Because most of the managers we have in Uganda, by the way, come after an artist has blown up. Yes. He has done something. And then he's down hiring the manager. Yeah. But if you're looking for a manager who's going to hire you and then invest in you, that's going to take time. Yeah. So as a solo artist, you find that you have to do almost everything, and then along the way people come and support, So looking at your craft, how you can make a business out of it, either directly or indirectly, it means you need to, you have to think, but you need a team. They might not be your permanent team members, but share a word with someone like, okay, how can we make this a business?
Welcome to the Creative Industry Talk today. My name is Eddie Okela, and my guest on the program today is a poet. He's a lawyer, he's a writer, he's a theater poetry writer. That's the right, correct, title for him. Ngobi Kagayi, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for coming, and we're grateful to have you this day on the program. Have you been?
I've been okay. We've seen better days, but here we are still hanging in there.
Yeah. And of course, starting on that lighter note, COVID-19 came and disrupted so many things around us.
Yes.
How have you been able to manage to stay afloat as an artist?
Well, the only way you can survive in a disruption is by proving to be a disruption to the force itself. Yes. And so for me, to be honest with you, the only way I've been able to survive was I had to adapt my methods of livelihood. Yeah. As a person who was always performing and being always there, putting my works out there to see how people can come to theaters. Theaters were closed. Yeah. Now we had to come up with new means, and that is when I went into publishing. So for me, I just started creating products for our audiences to start reading. Yeah. So if previously they were watching, now we wanted them to read our stuff. They had time to be home, so there were no excuses.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. What a very fantastic turnaround on time there. I want to take this moment to welcome all of you guys to the program. The Creative Industry Talk exists for all of you creative people out there, and every creative thinker out there, every creative mind out there. This is a platform for you to share ideas, to expose your work, and to make sure that if you have work like Ngobi has said, make sure you find a new means to share it out. And this is one of the means to share it out, and we're going to definitely be showing some of his works here while we do the interview. We're live on Twitter, live on Facebook, live on YouTube. Go there, share it far and wide, love it, share it with your grandmother, grandfather, cousins, sisters, everyone all across the world. And to all the guys in the diaspora who always stay awake to watch the show, we're ready to rock and roll. Ngobi,
yes.
Coming back to you.
Yeah.
If I'm seeing you for the first time, and I'm wondering who you are,
yes,
what would you say is the right definition of you? Are you Ugandan? Who is Ngobi Kagayi? Are you Ugandan? If yes, what are the values that define you? From the ancestry point of view, which part of this beautiful country do you come from?
Yes, thank you. I am Ugandan. I was born in Jinja. I come from Iganga district, but I was born in Jinja. See, if I call myself the book guy, you know, like every time you see Kagayi, think of books. Every time you see me walk, every time you see me breathe, every time you see me talk, I want you to imagine Uganda's best literature. I want you to imagine Uganda's freshest young writers. I want you to imagine the future of the literary culture that East Africa portends.
Wow.
Yeah.
And from the family point of view, I mean, are you the firstborn, lastborn? Usually, how did you?
Those things. So I'm the firstborn for my father and mother. Yeah. But by the time those two lovebirds met, they had had children. And my mother had a daughter, and my father had a son. So I am the thirdborn for both of them, but I'm their first as well in a family of 4.
Okay.
Yes.
So growing up, how did you become a poet? First of all,
I became I'm a late bloomer. I became a poet in my 3rd year at Makerere University. It was not even in the plan to be a poet or to be a writer. I was humbly and diligently studying to be a lawyer. I swear, until one day, some young lady who is, to be honest, I used to fancy, tells me about poetry. And she says, Peter, if you like me, you better come and watch me perform at the National Theatre. And I said, okay, those things are for girls. Who wants to be there to start listening to flowers and stuff? But I went to the National Theatre, and man, from that time, my life changed. Because there are so many stereotypes that were debunked. First, indeed, there was a group of poets, but majority of them were guys. Secondly, there was poetry about culture, about patriotism, about Pan-Africanism, of course, about love. But there was a lot more to poetry than just things that I thought it was just about flowers. And the auditorium was packed to the brim. So I was surprised that there were people in Kampala who, like me, loved literature, loved poetry, but we didn't know that we existed. So that's when I joined the group. For me, the plan was always to be a lawyer. I was raised properly, you know, to get that white collar job. But after my 3rd year, immediately after graduation, I became a writer, because from the time that I first stepped in the theater, I knew this is where I belonged. I felt I had found myself.
Wow, what a fascinating story right there, Kagayi. I want to just, you know, before we get into the lawyer point of it, was any of your parents, you know, poets or writers or teachers?
Yes.
You know, because sometimes children tend to gravitate to what is around their space.
Yes.
You know, take us through that.
No, for me, I grew up. My parents are both my parents are primary school teachers. At least now they are retired, and they were both teaching English language, and so we had so many. For me, where in the house I grew up in, our toys were books. We could destroy everything in the house except books. Our parents loved reading. They treasured books. We saw the way you see parents today on their phones every day. Now, for us in our home, our parents were always reading books. We used to fight for the newspaper every day. Every time our father would come back home, the first thing we'd fight for was the crossword puzzle. We were that kind of family. So we grew up in a family that treasured reading, that valued reading as a vocational activity. And my father, nobody really fancied poetry, but my father had poetry books. So for me, I started reading poetry when I was young, but it was a private fascination. You don't go to your friends, you know, when you're playing soccer and you start telling them, guys, first wait, I want to recite for you William Wordsworth. No. So it was something that I nurtured from home, domestically, but privately. The first time I had a chance to publicly show my love for poetry was in my 3rd year. That is when I found a group of university students who were like me, were passionate about poetry, and we were open. We could share our sentiments, and everyone was okay with that.
Wow. Well, we're talking to Kagayi right here on the Creative Industry Talk. Do you have a question for him? Do you have something to say to Peter? Is the lawyer. We're going to get into the lawyer bit of it. Reading to become a lawyer.
Yeah.
And along the way, flipping to writing. It brings me to the first question. When did you first realize you wanted to actually be a writer?
Man, the first time I walked into the National Theatre stage. And for me, what attracted me to it was I was in the audience, and I'd been invited by a friend of mine who I didn't know took poetry this seriously, but I sat there and I felt moved by the words these young people were speaking. As I studied literature for 6 years, I honestly had never met a Ugandan poet in blood and flesh. Yeah. I always thought writers were dead, you know? Like, by the time they are teaching your book in school, at university, you must be dead. Yeah. So the idea of coming across a writer who was alive was alien to me. So the first time I walked into that stage, I saw what these guys were writing, I felt what they were writing, and I said to myself, I want to do that. I want to have the power to write words and speak them and move audiences the way I feel I have been moved.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And how long does it take you to write a book? You've been publishing books. We're going to get into it just now. How long does it take you to write a book?
No, my first book took me 6 years. 6 years to write and 1 year to prepare for publishing. So I would say 7 years. That is, you know, taking a period of, you know, learning to find your voice as a writer, learning to find your style, you know, as a writer, learning your market, you know, as a business person, learning about the reading culture. So it took me a period of 6 years to be able to understand that if I'm ever going to produce a book and I want people to read it long after I am gone, this is what I have to do.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, Ngobi, we're going to take you to this next question about flipping from the law.
Yes.
The first love being the law. And then now the second love became the first love. Have you ever practiced law? What did your parents see that you were not seeing? When you say to them, I'm going to be a writer, did your father or your mother loved it at the time? Can you take us through it? Because most times parents say, we want you to be a doctor. We want you to be an engineer. And most of those, you know, traditional parents like yours back in the days were typical teachers who lived in a career path that either a doctor or a lawyer, and I can see you're into being a lawyer.
Yeah.
What happened when you finally say, Mom, Dad, I'm sorry, but I think I gravitated towards this is where I want to be? What was the reaction from your parents? Just so that we can learn from you, for somebody out there who may not know how to turn around that.
Well, first and foremost, I practiced law for only 1 week. Actually, not even 1 week. I think for 4 days of the first week, and I spent more time writing poems than, you know, than writing legal briefs. All the days that I went to court, honestly speaking, the judge and the lawyers were making submissions. I was writing poems. So at the end of the week, I had to be honest to myself, and this was a question I asked myself. But Peter, what do you really want to do with your life? You are at a law firm, but you are writing poems more than actually attending to the legal work. So why are you cheating yourself? So why don't you focus on this thing that you're calling your passion, try to nurture it, and stop living a fake life, because you're pretending to enjoy this lawyering thing, but you are not. So I went and I talked to at the time I was still at LDC. I'd graduated, I had a bachelor's in law, and I was studying to get my practicing certificate. And we were in term 3. And so, but the time, but I was doing some practice, some paralegal work. And I said to myself, I'm not just cheating myself, but I'm also cheating my parents. They had given me tuition to pay. But I made sure I waited for my father to come back home, and my mother was already at home. So I went and I told them, I am done, I am tired, and I didn't eat your school fees.
Here is the money.
Here is the cash. Yeah. I want to be a writer. Please allow me to drop out of LDC and pursue this thing. And my father asked me the same question, and they were not happy, that to be honest.
You could see.
I could see. But then they could also understand that I wanted to do something that I wanted. So my father asked me the question, what are you going to do now? My answer to him was, what am I not going to do? And for me, because for me, I saw it as an opportunity to explore every other thing I always wanted to do with my poetry. So be it taking it to studio, be it taking it to theaters around the world, be it publishing it in books. Yeah. I felt this, I needed the time to grow, I needed the time to unlearn, I needed the time to practice my craft. And so they were not happy, but they were supportive. I mean, there are days I've gone home and I found my mother praying for my book, dedicating it to, and you walk in the house and she say, dear God, make my son a successful writer. Yes. So wow. I recognize those efforts that my parents, and the pains that they had to go through to allow me to become the thing that I wanted to be.
Well, I mean, what would be your best advice to a parent out there? I mean, at least you took a different path altogether. You were able to go out, tell your parents, look, respectfully, this is not something I feel I should continue. Allow me to drop out, pursue this, as opposed to going to do law and continue with the practicing certificate and get out of this law school, go to the courtroom or go to the law firm to try and practice law. Yet you know very well that your heart was not there and you're not going to enjoy it. So you definitely navigate the turbulent waters quite very nicely with your parents. Learning from the response from your parents and the decision you made then, what would be your best advice at this particular moment to children who want to make a turnaround? I mean, COVID-19 has come and hit. There is definitely a child out there who has turned around and realized that, you know what? The things I want to do, they wanted me to do at campus, I've since found out that my abilities are here and I want to develop this, and they are watching you right now. What would be your best advice to them? Not to say they should drop off school, but to go through what you've gone through is not an easy journey.
Yes, for me, first and foremost, what I'll tell them is both the parent and the child or the guardian. What I would say is you have a choice to make. Either you want to invest in success or you want to invest in happiness. Yes. For me, what I have realized is I wish I cared more about the things that made me happy as a child when I was growing up, so that I even become skilled, more skilled in the things that bring me joy. I wish our society, and this for me goes to the child, to the parent, to anybody invested in education. As a society, we need to start investing more in people's interests rather than society's interests. Because society's interests are static, but individual interests evolve with interests. The way you think of a child in nursery right now, imagine thinking what they're going to be doing 10 years from now, when we don't even know what COVID is going to behave like 2 months from now. So why do we prepare people for a future that we don't even know it looks like? You see, now for all the resources that my parents invested in me being a lawyer, I eventually became a writer. And if they were not the kind of people who were raised or who in themselves were flexible enough to allow me to do, there would have been conflicts that we had. So for me, the advice that I give to parents, to the kids is this: invest in your happiness. There is nothing more important to you in your life than your own happiness. And the things that make you happy, imagine if they're the things that were making you money. Thank you.
Wow. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a break. This gentleman is on the roll, and I so far love this first part of the interview. I am talking to Kagayi Ngobi Peter, who is a poet, a theater poet, a writer, and of course is a lawyer, practicing in the writing space. What a skill right there. And of course, if you have questions and answers, please drop it in there. We want to know whether you have some questions for Peter. If you're watching the show, please share it far and wide. Make sure you don't leave anyone behind. COVID-19 has come and hit, and we need to work with everyone. Stay right there. Creative Industry Talk. We'll be right back after this break. I want to know from you, and of course somebody who's watching this show either from here or a child watching in Myanmar or wherever they're watching, or in Congo where we're watched very much, would want to know, if I don't have the money and I have the passion and I have the zeal and I have the drive, but money is also needed to start it, how do I start? Where do I go? At least for you, your father gave you 300,000 to go and do a course. We don't know whether you spent the whole school fees or you only spent 1 month, took part of the school fees. What happened? How did you start, your fashion? Did you get money from somewhere? How should one start if I want to start? And I was like Kasozi.
I think we should try to be close to people who love what we do, basically. Yeah. Because even me, I managed to skip from that low level to another level because I had networks. Yes. Just me and Mia meeting Gloria Wavamuno changed my mind. Because I used to be in Muyayona Street. So someone introduced me to Gloria Wavamuno, that I'm good, me I didn't know. Then, I lost my phone like over 2 months. Yes. So surprisingly, I got a text from Gloria. Customers have been looking for you over the last 3 months. Then my mind was like, the daughter of a tycoon is looking for me. I was even moving on Loom Street. Yes. So that changed my mind and started respecting myself a bit. Like, somehow I'm important. If someone important
is looking for me,
that's opened my mind and started to know that I need to be serious, have a skill, have a business, and also work more with my fashion, because by then I was still an amateur. Yeah. So I never had money to go to buy books, and no designer could invite me, So I got to know basically all the knowledge through Aristotle, but I couldn't afford any book. I could go open and feed the mind. I move out, I make notes before I forget. Yes. Yeah.
When you're alive, it's easy to forget that you will die, or even that death actually exists. Beyond wreaths, caskets and cemeteries encountered seasonally. You cannot feel the sting of death anymore. You believe such things are reserved for others, the unwanted stepchildren of gods who did not exist anyway. When you're young, it's easy to forget that you grow old, that you lose the smooth texture of skin or the milky white of eye, that you're beautiful. Black flocks of hair shall grow one day, and your heart will grow weary with lack of ambition. You forget that one day you lose the spring of step and the innocence of youth. You lose the liberty to dream dreams and the lifetime to chase them. You forget that you grow bold, bent and bitter. When you're healthy, well sane and strong, it's easy to forget the pain of illness, the physical pain and the mental pain, the anguish of immobility, the dread of impending death, and the insane lasting afterlife itself. When you're born in Kampala, it's easy to forget the deprivation of rural childhood. When you're bread and buttered bread and frozen milk, it's easy to forget the hard-corn cobwebs, welcoming the toddler and Moroto to yet another day every day. When you're perpetually conflicted between beef and mutton for dinner, it's easy to forget the thousands of fellow citizens out there who've been constantly unsure of their next meal from the day they left the womb. If the toughest read in your life has been choosing between Buddha and Namagunga for your high school education, it's easy to forget that 70% of the nation's children do not have the chance of knowing the meaning of the boring word blackboard. When you're alive, it's easy to forget that you'll die. When you're safe, sound, fat and pampered in your gated and manicured suburban homes, it's easy to forget that the masses of Ugandans out there can only manage half the night's sleep, wooing to incessant battles with mosquitoes, bedbugs, and stomach grumbling from emptiness. When you've gained admission to Makerere, it's easy to forget that you were once mortal, that the blood in your veins isn't of blue hue, and that your arteries are not pipes of gold-plated steel. When you're young, it's easy to forget that you grow old, and surely you'll die. When you're young, when all you think of is girls and boys and toys, a good job, money to spend and life to live, it's easy to forget that your country needs you. That by sitting there and wishing for good times, by refusing to involve yourself in efforts to right the wrongs of society, you're effectively betraying your country. When you're young, it's easy to forget that by not speaking for justice and writing for justice and walking and marching for justice, you're effectively as guilty as the corrupt robbing public funds, as guilty as those parasitic politicians for killing pregnant